Hello everybody, this is Gareth Cahoon Speaks back here with another video. I'd like you to hit the subscribe bar, give me a thumbs up if you like the video, or hit the notification bell to be notified when I post my next post. Or otherwise you can donate to my ministry and the charities that I support at garethcahoon3@gmail.com on PayPal. This one here is about why rediscovering Shavuot matters today. The way back is the way forward. Many today are praying for a Yeshua movement, an incredible work of the gospel in our generation. But in order to understand who are a Jesus follower is who a Jewish follower is today, we need to understand who we were as Messiah Yeshua followers. And Shavuot, or as it's known in English, Pentecost, is the ground floor. It is the ground floor of the beginning of the Yeshua revolution. It could be said then that the way forward is the way back. So let's look back. The context of Pentecost, Shavuot, matters. Yeshua Jesus instructed the disciples after the resurrection to wait in Jerusalem for the promise of the Father. Acts 1 verse 4. We know that there was a specific day in mind for that promise to be revealed, and that day was the day of Pentecost, or as it's known in Hebrew, Shavuot. This day is one of the three pilgrimage festivals required by the Lord in Exodus 23 verses 14 to 17, 34 verses 18 to 24, Deuteronomy 16 verses 16 to 17. Penti means 50 in Greek. It refers to counting the harvest 50 days after Passover. The Hebrew name is Shavuot, which means weeks. It is a harvest festival celebrating the end of the barley harvest and the first fruits of the wheat harvest. Yet on the minds of hundreds of thousands attending that Pentecost was the belief that the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible, had been given on Shavuot, Pentecost, 1300 years earlier. The Jewish tradition is called Zaman Matan Torah, the season of the giving of the law. When the Lord separated his people from Egypt and called them into relationship with him, it is when the earth shook with flashes of lightning and God spoke in the thunder. What took place 50 days after Yeshua gave his life on the cross? When the day of Pentecost had fully come, Acts 2 verse 1 reveals that the parallels between the giving of the law and the ground floor of the Yeshua revolution are unmistakable. God demonstrated his presence atop Mount Sinai 1300 years earlier. On the ground floor of the Yeshua revolution atop Mount Zion, God demonstrated his presence, power and purposes to 120 Jewish believers. On Mount Sinai, God gave his commandments on tablets of stone, written with the finger of God on the ground floor of the Jesus Yeshua revolution. Atop Mount Zion, the Spirit of God wrote the commandments on human hearts. At Mount Sinai, 3,000 were judged because of idolatry on the ground floor of the Jesus revolution. Atop Mount Zion, 3,000 people came to faith in Yeshua the Messiah. In essence, the knowledge of God was exploding through the faithful remnant of Israel in the 120 followers of Yeshua atop Mount Zion. They were the remnant that was publicly and divinely identified with tongues of fire above their heads and given the gift of tongues to communicate the wonderful works of God to an international gathering from 15 different geographical locations with a variety of languages. Acts 2, verse 3 and verse 5 to 11. Peter, after being empowered and gifted by the Spirit, declared that Yeshua, in his death, resurrection, and ascension, was creating all things new in himself and would return to establish his kingdom on the earth in the city of Jerusalem. The new covenant that has been inaugurated by Yeshua's blood on the cross on Passover, Nisan 14, was now transforming 3,000 Jews who had repented and were being indwelt by the Ruach of God. Acts 3:37 to 41. From now on, the nations of the world could enter the new covenant that had been given to Israel to bless the world through the Messiah of Israel, and could now also experience the outpouring of God's Ruach or Spirit. Acts 2 verses 16 to 21 and verse 39. The context of this reveals an unstoppable plan of God. Both Passover and Pentecost were prophetic. Their ultimate fulfillment is in the person and work of Messiah Yeshua. Years ago, the apologist and Christian philosopher Francis Schaeffer was asked, what is the greatest obstacle to the modern church? His answer was fascinating, both in what he didn't say as well as what he did. He didn't say that the major problem was the isms in the culture. Example, secularism, materialism, atheism, relativism, socialism, communism, but rather he said the real problem is this: the Church of the Lord, Yeshua the Messiah, individually, cooperatively tending to do the Lord's work in the power of the flesh rather than of the Spirit. The central problem is always in the midst of the people of God, not in the circumstances surrounding them. Rediscovering the ground floor of the Yeshua revolution in the first century in its original context can bring renewal and even an reorientation in God's intended course and mission in the church. Below are just a few examples. First, the context of Pentecost tells us that God's purposes for our lives are only accomplished in his strength. Yeshua said, for John truly baptized in water, but he also said, you shall receive power when the Ruach HaKodesh has come upon you, and you shall be witnesses to me in Jerusalem and in all Judea, Samaria, and in the uttermost parts of the earth. Acts 1 verses 4 to 5 and verse 8. The Spirit's work is comprehensive. He indwells the believer and gives assurance of being a child of God, Romans 8:16. He brings the believer into intimacy with the Abba Father, Romans 8:15. The Spirit comes upon the believer to empower with divine gifting for divine mission. Acts 1 verse 16. Zechariah 4 verse 5 reads, it is not my power, not by might, but by my Spirit, says the Ruach. The Ruach of God is the source of our strength in all areas of life. We need to be filled with the Spirit on a daily basis, Ephesians 5:18. Second, the context reveals that Peter was addressing a specific audience. You men of Israel, Acts 2:22. In principle, it speaks of a priority, often overlooking in Romans 1:16. Paul wrote, for I am not ashamed of the gospel of Christ, for it is the power of God to salvation for everyone who believes, for the Jew first and also to the Greek. Come back for part 2 of this post. Shalom, Maranatha, and Hallelujah.